Hey there. Thanks for tuning in. You ready for another episode of My Bigfoot Sighting? Alright then, let's do this.
Seen a bunch of rundown no-horse towns where the church is the backbone, love's in the plow, and the five-string melodies grooving, with the farmland rows where the roots run deep, beyond the noise of the busy streets, where the songs of the South are soothing. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah.
My Bigfoot sightings all happened in Mississippi. My name's Bryan, and I've got several Bigfoot sightings in Mississippi and a few occurrences that could be contributed to them. I'll leave them towards the end where we get the sightings out of the way first. I'm from Mississippi. I live on a small farm, family farm. It's been in the family since about the end of World War I. Just kind of give y'all an idea. It's been there a while. And my family, my mother and her two brothers, my uncles, have lived there all their lives, basically, except Mom when we had moved to Georgia for a little while. But everything happens in Mississippi. And to give you a little idea, because the house plays into it as well. So I'm going to set up the house the best I can to where y'all can understand how it sits. When you pull up to the property, you pull up on a 4-lane highway, you turn into the driveway, and there sits the house, and the bulk of the property goes behind the house and to the east. It goes southwest, not east. The house sits more on the east, north side of the property. Then there's some property across the highway, but all the sightings happened on the house side of the property. The property, once it goes behind the house, it falls down a hill into a valley, back up a hill. Then it probably about 3/4 of a mile or so, it falls back down into another valley, into a old slough that holds water from time to time when it rains, and an old creek that runs on the back of the property that goes from our neighbors through ours back to the neighbors in a straight line. Almost a north to south configuration on the creek. And that back property is nothing but woods, or the neighbors is nothing but woods around our property. So, a good little hiding spot for all the usual critters, deers, raccoons, possums, armadillos, you name it. For the most part, we got it. But the house itself, when you go back up to the house, is on a raised foundation. It's probably 1.5 to 2 feet till you get to the actual floor of the house. And then to about the roof line, it's maybe 10 feet to where the bottom of the roof comes down to the eaves. And then to about the top of the windows, it's probably, 8 feet, 7 feet to the top of the windows from outside of the house. Because the house, it's not the vaulted ceilings, it's just the taller ceilings inside. So, it's a nice house. It's an older house. All the bedrooms are on the back side, the kitchen, the dining room, the living room, and what used to be a front porch on the highway side, the front side of the house. And windows all throughout the house, all the tall windows. So, you get plenty of light. You get plenty of, you can see what's going on for the most part. Well, at this time, I was living there at the house with my grandmother because my grandfather had passed away. And this was about 2013. It was one of those weird winters where one day or one week it may actually be winter temps where it's actually cold. Then the next day or next week it winds up being almost spring temps where it's like 60, 70, sometimes 80 degrees, and it goes back to being winter the next day or next week. Well, this is one of those warm weeks. I gotten off work, where I'd worked at, I was one of the closing managers, so it wasn't unusual for me to close and be well after dark, 9, 10 o'clock, me heading to the house. And it was a cloudy night, but every once in a while, there was a full moon that night. Every once in a while, the moon would poke through and would pretty much light up everything for the most part, where you can make out what was going on. So on the way home, I decided, I'll just go sit in my deer stand for a little while in that back pasture. Not thinking anything would go on, anything would happen, I just want to go watch deer for a little while, just relax. So I get home, make sure my grandmother, all right, make sure she had eaten, made sure the dogs had gotten fed and all the usual chores, that I did around the house. She went on to bed and I told her, I'm going to walk back to my deer stand. Like I said, it's actually almost a mile from the house itself. And me being me, I'll walk back there, not really thinking again, anything's going to happen. Of course, I had my hunting rifle with me and I had my pistol with me, just in case. And we do have cows on the property. My uncles both have cows. And if you're not familiar with cows, I'll stop right here and just say with cows, for the most part, you've got 3 different attitudes with them. Basically, they're either going to be a very curious animal, come up, see what you're doing, follow you, that stuff. Or they're just going to mind their business, going about their business, like, oh, it's you. And then, like I said, they just do their own little thing. Or they're going to try to get you out of their area, run you off, because they just don't want you in your area for a variety of reasons, whether it's just, hey, that's my area, don't want you here, you're near my baby, or whatever. Or you may get a combination of the 3 or all 3, just them being them. Well, anyway, so I get up to the top of that hill to go through the gate. There sits the cows. And only one of them really pays me attention. And I passed her, kind of reached out, rubbed her head just a minute. They were that friendly. And she started following me, took a few steps, and I heard her stop. And I turned around and I looked at her. She had those front hooves stretched out in front of her, and I wouldn't have been able to move her if I wanted to. So I said, okay, whatever. Maybe, coyotes had come through, wild dogs or something, me thinking the, usual suspects, usual critters. There was just a smell in the air going that way they didn't like, and they just didn't want nothing to do with it. So, cool beans. I keep going. Finally get back to the deer stand, get up in it. And this is just before the moon really started poking through really, really good. So I sat there and I sat there and I sat there and I had the hill and the tree lines behind me. Then they came around to my right and went out in front of me. But where my stand was, there was a few trees, but not many. It was mostly open pasture, and I could see down to that creek because I had it up against that far fence line. So I thought, about after an hour sitting there, I ain't seen nothing. I'll get out of the tree stand and go up that little hill to my right that falls on off into the pasture, because maybe they're over there. Trying to think of all the obvious scenarios. Maybe it's just where they want to be. Maybe they heard me and they just kind of migrated that way. Maybe they smelt me. Something simple. And the hill, to the top of the hill, if you draw a straight line, level line out from the top, and then where it flattens out in the pasture, it's probably 50-foot drop, but it's not a drop. It just gently goes down a hill. So it's not like, oh, you got to worry about walking off an edge or something. It's just an old pasture, just old hilly pasture, basically, and then flattens out to the slough and then to the creek. And then it picks back up after the creek. So I start walking up that hill. I probably get 25, 30 yards up, about halfway up to the top of this hill. And I stopped. I got the pasture to my left. I got the wood lines to my right, and way back behind me is the wood lines. I was sitting there, I was like, I kind of got this weird feeling of being watched. I turned around, got my little flashlight out because the moon ain't quite showing through that well yet, just enough to light things up, just barely. I start turning around from the way I came, and I'm turning to my left, so I'm turning out, watching the pasture as I'm doing this. And I get about 3/4 of the way around from almost pointing back to the way I came. And I noticed these 2 white orbs, what looked like orbs about the size of dimes at the bottom of that hill, sitting there facing me. Yeah, that's interesting. Is that like a deer? Because my light's just bright enough to catch this. Then I see what looks like they're blinking. Not rapidly, but just blink, few seconds, blinks again. So I was like, okay, well, maybe that's a deer. And then I got to think, no, that sucker would have probably turned and ran off. I got to looking, got to really paying attention. Now, I mean, this is all, I probably stood there a good minute before the moon actually broke through. I'm sitting, it's staring at me, I'm staring at it. And I could tell the eyes were just like ours, where they're both on the front of the face, is what I mean. Not on side the head, like a deer, cow, or horse, or something of that nature. So I was like, well, maybe someone's back here with me wearing, I don't know, glasses or something. That's the only thing that I could come up with at the time, me seeing a reflection. So I call out, hey, anyone back here? You need help? You lost? You're trespassing. About a second or two goes by and I get, okay. Oh, weird. You hurt? I went to take a step to go that way, and that's about when the moon broke through the clouds. And it lit up this big, and I mean big, 7+ foot, hairy, humanoid creature. I could tell it was, like I said, just a normal. It was a combination between a gorilla's head, where they got that weird watermelon shape to it, where it's got that point towards the back, but it had more of the human features, as far as the way the eyes are set, the nose, and the mouth, from the best I could tell, the way the shadow one was. But it was just massive. I couldn't tell much definition. I just knew it was big. It was thick. It had muscle. It didn't look like it was ripped like Arnold Schwarzenegger, but it was fairly barrel chested, but just big, and about a good 4 to 5 feet in the shoulders. No neck, just pretty much like you picked the head up, took the neck out, dropped the head back on the chest. And we're sitting there staring at each other. That voice in the back of my mind is going, is that? No. Yeah? That? I mean, I'm sitting there searching for this thing. And we just sat there and looked at each other for a couple of seconds. And I kind of threw my hands up to my side. I was like, okay, I'm going to go on up the hill, make this loop. And I'm going on back to the house. Because it decided to turn and go back to its right. I was like, you go that way. I'm going to go this way. I don't want nothing to do with you. Because I was a big boy. Assuming it is a dude. Assuming. So I get up to the top of the hill, and if you've ever played around with knocking 2 pieces of wood together, the sound of wood on wood knocking. By the time I get to the top of the hill and back to the woods, it sounded like it, whatever you want to call it, grabbed a good size tree branch and just smacked the side of a tree with it. It wasn't breaking. It was that wood on wood contact, that wood on wood knock. So, I picked up my pace, got on back to the house. Like I said, it was about a mile. Didn't say nothing to no one for a while. And then for several nights throughout the years since then, being in the house, I could turn over in bed because my bedroom was on the east side of the house, the east back side of the house. And I could look between that crack every now and again between the blinds and the edge of the window. And I could see this thing standing at my window. If it was any closer, it would have its face up against the screen if it got any closer. And I could tell by sitting there, I could see the right side of the head, couldn't tell detail, but could tell it was the head and see the right shoulder or right collarbone going out to the shoulder. Now, the first time I saw it doing that, I thought, okay, it's got to be the way the lighting is outside. Got to be one of my grandmother's bushes or something. I'm just seeing the bush weird. So, I tried that for several different nights, several different days, going outside, looking at the bush, laying back in the bed, and I couldn't reproduce this to save my life until I caught it doing it again. Now, how many times it did this, I couldn't tell you, but I've caught it on at least 5 different occasions doing this over the years. And that's a little weird, a little creepy. I got a stalker of the animal kind. But it is pretty much that for a while. Then in 2015, I was house sitting in Mississippi, just about an hour south of the farmhouse. And I was also going to school to get my CDLs. And my friend just conveniently had a house close to the school I was going to, and she needed somebody to watch the house because she was going away somewhere. And there is a house trailer. And when you walk into the house trailer, is the front door, you walk into the living room. To your right, there's another door on the far wall. Then there's 2 bedrooms and a bathroom. And that door on the far wall had a dog door because she had dogs. And, when she was working, she didn't want them cooped up all day. But to your left was the kitchen and her bedroom. And then the laundry room. And then there's kind of a partial wall. So when you sat in the recliner, you couldn't really look into the kitchen completely. And she had the TV up against the wall where that door was that had the dog door. And she had this cat that would randomly come and go as it pleased. Well, one night, and I had my pit bull with me. He went with me. She didn't care as long as he didn't tear nothing up, didn't make a mess. She didn't care. He was inside with me, laying by the chair, watching TV. Here goes the cat through the dog door, going into the kitchen and get him something to eat. All right, cool beans. Dog didn't pay it no mind because that's just the way he was. If it wasn't messing with him, he didn't care. And if it wasn't food, didn't care. So a few minutes goes by and I forgot all about the cat. Completely forgot about the cat. Now the dog door, before I go further, the dog door was the vinyl door, the flexible little vinyl door, probably 10 inches wide, 10 inches wide. And then probably that tall, somewhere in that ballpark. It wasn't a big dog door, but it wasn't little. It wasn't the little one. Anyways, I noticed something batting at it, pushing it back inside the trailer. I looked down. Well, my dog's sitting next to me. He's kind of got one eye cocked over there, got his eyes cocked over there looking at it because he sees it too. It was pushing it in just enough to catch my attention. Wasn't enough to actually lift up or pick up and reveal what was doing it. So at first I thought, okay, I missed the cat going out. It's got to be the cat. And again, this place was out in the middle of nowhere, out in the country. So not many people to mess with you. So I get up thinking, okay, it's the cat. I'm going to go have a little bit of fun with the cat, just get the cat to stop, run the cat off, just play with it for a minute. Take a step forward, look to my left in the kitchen. Guess who's sitting on the table? The cat, looking at me. Okay. So I look back, make sure, okay, my dog's sitting there. He's sitting there looking at me. Okay. Maybe it's another cat. Maybe it's a raccoon. I don't know, but we're about to find out. So I ease over there to the door, put my back against the wall. And I've been timing it this whole time because it's every few seconds. It pushed it. So I waited. I got my hand down there. I mean, I'm right at this door where I can grab it as soon as it comes in and pick up. So it pushes it in. I grab the door. Oh, I got you now. And what came through that door was this big, massive hand with hair. I'm just sitting there looking at this thing because I'm just inches from this dog door. And I just let the door go, and I calmly walked back over to the recliner, looked down. We're not going to the bedroom tonight. We're sleeping in the recliner. And that was the end of that one. Well, fast forward, had got my CDLs, went to drive, and I was back at the farmhouse, my grandparents' old place, and my grandmother was still alive. And a couple years go by, really nothing out of the ordinary happens, except for one night I'd gotten home, and at the time my dog was riding with me because my company let me take him on the road. I get home, it's about 1 o'clock in the morning, and I go inside. I let him out of the truck. He goes over, says hi to her border collie, does the usual, nothing funny. And then I go inside, and I had to deactivate the house alarm, which was in her bedroom, which she's fine with it. And when he ran inside, because he's going to go see her because they were best friends, and I heard, oh, booger, she's just happy, ecstatic that he was home. Okay, she's up. That's a little weird, but okay. So go in there, deactivate the alarm, and told her, or motioned that I had to go back outside because my grandmother couldn't really hear until she put her hearing aids in. So I go back out to the truck, grab all my stuff I needed for in the house, grabbed his bowls, went back in, and she asked me, she goes, you ain't noticed anybody outside when you pulled up just a little while ago? Keep in mind, this is 1 o'clock at night or in the morning. I was like, no, because where I parked the truck and the way I walked up to the house, when I pulled in the driveway, I seen the front side of the house, the east side of the house, saw the west side of the house, and when I parked the truck and walked up, I saw the back of the house going to the first couple of pastures that my grandparents had set up behind the house. I don't know. Just, your border collie and me and him. That's it. And she goes, well, something hit the house 3 times hard. Hey, well, I mean, nobody's run off the road and ain't nobody sitting up here. I mean, just me, you, and them two. Me referring to the dog. So, I checked it out. Nothing. Next morning, the gal that normally sat with my grandmother at the time, she showed up finally. And I'd been poking around outside all morning, trying to figure out what in the world could have hit the house like that. And I know what she's talking about because it's done it before with me, where something has slapped the side of the house 3 times. And it wasn't a tree branch, wasn't anything like that. Nothing explainable. But anyways, the young lady, she pulled up, and, she lived across the highway. The oldest uncle, he lives across the highway. You can see his house, and she lives a little bit further down behind him. And they've got cows. They've got, of course, young calves and stuff of that nature. Well, she seen me outside messing around, and I seen her pull up. I could tell she's waiting on me, and I walked back up to the house because I was at the little storage shed behind the house, making sure no one had gotten into it and no one had messed around at the tractor shed below the house either. And we greeted each other. She goes, you mind going over to the house and help my husband real quick, or when you get a chance? Yeah, well, what's up, And come to find out, they had a calf go missing. No gates down, no gates broken, no fences down, no fences broken, none of that. Nothing. This calf got picked up by something, because you could tell it was laying down close to the fence towards the backside of their property where it met up against ours. And something in the trees, or right there inside the tree lines, not in the trees, but there's trees that went up to their property from our property. But something had reached over this 4-strand barbed wire and picked this calf up that was probably 500 to 600 pounds from what her husband was telling me, what his guesstimate of it weighed, and walked off with it, just like he was walking off with the sandwich. And no one had found any remains, nothing. So, it went on, didn't really think too much of it. Well, my grandmother passed away in 2017. Later that year, I had went in for the funeral. It was January. I was home in March. Anyways, Mom and Dad, they were coming down. They wanted to stay at the house for a little while, and they knew I was at the house. No big deal. And Mom called me the night before, doing what moms typically do, making sure I was okay, making sure that they didn't need to bring anything extra, Mom being Mom. And I hang up the phone after talking to her for a few minutes. This isn't at night. It done gotten dark. Probably getting close to 9 o'clock by then, best I remember. And I hear what sounds like a dog barking. At this time, my pit bull was living with them because his hips had gotten bad, and I didn't want him suffering with all the jolts and bumps and the truck. So Mom and Dad are like, hey, we're retired. We'll watch him. And my grandmother's dog had passed away about a year or so prior to this. And there was no other dogs around. And I had looked up when it done that, and I noticed somebody's headlights were shining up the power lines that runs back behind the house, the length of the property, and goes on. So here I am. I'm grabbing my blue jeans, my boots, stomping into everything, running out the door, calling the cops because I got trespassers. Get out the door, and I guess they heard the door shut or something. They took off. So by this time, I'm waiting on the sheriff to get there, and I walked down to where I kept my equipment just on my end of the house, on that east side of the house, made sure, everything was fine, and went back in the house, grabbed my flashlight, grabbed my shotgun, because I was going to walk directly behind the house down that hill into that little pasture where my grandfather had one tractor shed, because he had 2 tractors and a couple other pieces of equipment under that little shed. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go check on them real quick, because make sure they didn't cut the fence and they didn't manage to sneak something out without me hearing them being at the house. And so I get at the bottom of the hill, I look into the tractor shed, everything's there. And for some reason, I thought the pan to my left. The left side was where they were and all my stuff is, and fence line probably 40 feet away, 30 feet, something like that. And I see what caught my attention were those same 2 white orbs staring. And I caught this out of the peripheral of my vision as I was panning. And I fully turned my head, and I caught just enough of them. Couldn't catch the color because he's just that far enough out of my light where I couldn't catch the color. But I could catch the silhouette, the body, the shoulders, the head. I could tell he's squat. Looks up at me, looks back up to its right, because he's facing me, and the house is behind me and to its right. Looks up at the house, looks back at me. And I got that feeling, that sensation like, uh-oh, you wasn't supposed to see me. I thought I was hid. And I'm just standing there, just baffled. So, okay, we got the one in 2012, 2013, and here it is, 2017. And I'm not going to speculate that it was the same one. It may have been, I don't know, but I'm sitting there going, and here we are again. Nothing in our way but a fence. And after, this was about a good minute, maybe, or pretty close to a minute. It slowly stands up, and I'm trying not to run because I'm thinking, okay, predator, possibly, don't run. Because running in a lot of cases mean that game's on. Well, to my surprise, he slowly turned around, put its back to me eventually, and walked off into the woods. That's kind of a sigh of relief because, I'm sitting there trying to figure out what it's doing. It's figuring out what I'm doing. Just walks off. Okay, cool. So I walk back up to the house. I'm probably 50 yards from the house. Wait on the cops. Didn't say nothing to the cops because I definitely didn't want no one running around trying to find something that didn't want to be found. Anyways, I'd let that situation go, just put it in the back of my mind. And about 2018, I was home again. No, let me back up. 2017, Thanksgiving of 2017. Went home. And like I said, on the west end of the house, about 150 yards, sits our barn. And my grandfather and great-grandfather had it set up where in front of the barn, it was the corral, where when they had to get the cows up, they could have a small enough area but big enough at the same time to work with the cows to hold calves if they were hauling them off to the livestock barn that weekend or something. Well, my uncles had a few calves in that little pen there. They had room, they had water, they had food. They were being taken care of. Well, my parents at the time lived in Georgia. So I made my rounds to Georgia, stayed there a couple of days, went to Mississippi, went to the farmhouse, and I stayed there a couple of days before I went back on and got back in the truck to go on. Well, the first night I was down there, I said, what the heck? Went back on that front porch that came off of my room, and I had a set of shelves there. I had parts for trucks that I'm working on, project trucks. It was getting late, and I thought to myself, I'm through organizing, checking on everything. I'll just go in town and get me something to eat, instead of cooking, getting messy that late in the evening, didn't want to really fully clean it up. So I stepped out the door into the bedroom, locked it, stepped into the hallway, and the hallway's on the back side of the house. It's that bedroom, middle bedroom, a bathroom, and then the master bedroom. Then it turns and opens into the kitchen, which is on the front side of the house. Again, I had to go, arm the alarm in the bedroom. So I stepped into the hallway, and I'm hearing something. And all I hear is, but I could tell it was far off. I backed up in the bedroom, thinking, is someone on this end of the house? Are they hurt? It's not uncommon for a wreck or something to happen out there. Well, it got quieter as I backed up into my bedroom. I went on the alarm. As I'm going towards the barn end of the house, it's getting louder. So I'm, hustling a little bit. So I get outside. It gets loud. It hits me like a brick almost, as loud as it was. And I'm sitting there looking all around back of the house. It's not coming from back there. So I had to step to the front of the house to my Jeep. I'm looking around the front of the house and no one's up there. I'm paying attention. And it's like, well, the more I pay attention, it's coming from the barn. I was like, oh crap, my uncle's cows. And I hop in the Jeep and I grab my pistol out of the door and I had it sitting on my lap. There's one tractor shed down there also right before you get to the barn, but I could look in the back of it as I was pulling up. Nothing in the tractor shed, and by the time I get down there, I've got the window down in the Jeep. It stops. So, I pulled around that tractor shed, nosing up to the gate to go into the lot for the barn. I'm looking in that tractor shed, make sure I didn't miss something or someone. And I get out. I'm sitting there panning the lot, keeping the gate closed because if someone's in there, I want it to be as hard for them to get at me before I can get back to the Jeep or, something. I'm looking around. I look at the cast. They're all in one corner, scared to death of something. Something was after them. And I was able to look up, turn to my right. They were to my left. And I turned to my right to look in the barn. Nothing was there other than one of my uncle's tractors and a corn crusher and 3 corn trailers. So I made sure I clanged the gate real good, clanged the chain on the gate real good, get whatever's attention, maybe, hopefully run it off to where I can see, what I'm dealing with. Because there's no other place in this big field to hide unless it gets on the other side of that little hill into the valley and ducks down or goes to the pond and gets in the pond. It wasn't cold. It wasn't cold enough to where the water would have bothered whoever. But I stepped over to the barn, and the pond was just behind the barn. I could see into it, looking through the barn, or what we call it a barn. And no one's in the barn. Walked back over to the calves. Nothing's over there in there with them. Nothing's over in the pasture with that other tractor shed. Nothing there that I could see, and nothing hauling but through the pasture. Okay, well, it could have been because no one was hauling butt down the highway, and my other uncle lived just up that hill on the same side of the highway as we did. If they would have ran up that hill past that light line, he would have seen them. His dogs would have gone nuts, but his dogs didn't go nuts. So I went on, didn't think too much of it. Then I was home and one time in 2018, and I was standing outside on the carport. It was at night again, and there's a nightlight on the carport. The carport is on the barn side of the house. It's on the east side of the house. And that nightlight lights up the carport enough to where if you're standing on it and you pass by, you can tell somebody's there. And we have one neighbor just behind us on the east side. And we don't have any issues with that neighbor. That neighbor doesn't mess around. They do their thing. They mind their business. So I know it wasn't him. And people out there, they don't mess around, especially at night, unless it's one of the local crackheads that got brave enough. Well, I hear something walking up to the house, and you can hear swoosh, swoosh, like walking through a bunch of leaves and you're kicking them, like you did as a kid. So first I'm looking around. I make sure there ain't no one walking up from the highway or something. Yeah, this goes on for several seconds. So I figure, okay, well, it's coming back here from the woods where I saw the other one squatting down by the fence. That's the only thing, because there's trees, bunch of leaves, And then all of a sudden I hear something talking. Some people call it samurai talk. To me, it sounded like gibberish, but with a purpose. Almost like when your toddler is sitting there, they're talking to you. You got no clue what they're saying, but they're telling you something interesting. This lasts a couple of seconds, 5 seconds at the most. And I'm thinking, logically here, okay, somebody's hurt. They need help. They see me up here on the carport, so I call out, step off the carport, and I call out, do you need help? Do you need me to call 911? Let me know something. I was about to walk down there. It got quiet. And it did the same walk going back down the fence line, that swoosh, walking through leaves. So I'm thinking, no, it's not someone that'd be typically hurt. So I jump in the Jeep because I'm not about to walk down there at night, because I'd at least want something, a little bit more protection than a pistol. First, I thought maybe it was the neighbor, by some chance of it. point my lights down to his driveway, because his driveway goes on our property a little bit, and we can see the bulk of it. And we can see the bulk in front of his house to a degree. No one cut down through there. So I whipped the Jeep back around and pointed it down the fence line into the woods. And probably a good 100 yards down, I saw those two white orbs, forward facing. They're about the size of my pinky from, the distance. Like I said, it's about 100 yards. Down there in that bottom, up against the fence line. I could tell it was on my side of the fence line, not in the pastures. We sat there for a good few seconds looking at each other. And it squats down, gets real low to the ground, real good, and stands back up. I had enough time to go, okay, this thing's about 6 feet. It wasn't as tall as my first two encounters. My first two encounters, they were 7 feet plus. And like I said, this one was about 6 feet. It was a little bit shorter from guesstimation here. So I rolled my window down and I hollered out, okay, I'll check it in the morning. I ain't coming down there. Just kind of see if I could get somewhat of a reaction, get a grunt, get something. And it just turns and walks away. Okay. That's weird, but cool, I guess. As long as it goes its way and leaves me alone, I'm good. So next morning, I walk down there. Sure enough, there's a tree down on the fence line about where it was. But when I had started walking down that fence line that next morning, there was one footprint in the grass. It wasn't deep enough to cast, wouldn't have been able to cast it because I'd reached down there with my hand to see if there was an actual indention, but it pressed the weeds down, the grass down just enough to where I could tell it was a footprint about like ours, where you could tell there was a big toe and it angled back off. It was the right foot. So it angled off to the right, and then you could tell a heel. But like I said, it wasn't deep enough to cast or leave an impression. But I put my boot by it, and I wear a 9.5. And this thing was every bit as long as the outside soles of my boot. So this thing was 9.5, 10 inches long, and they were barefooted. I'm sitting there like, in this area, there's briars everywhere. So I'm sitting there like, no, that ain't somebody just kind of hollering butt down through here. This is something that's used to this stuff, that briars and whatnot and whatever else you can think, to stick in its feet, it's used to it. I said something to my uncles because he'd come over shortly after because he's going to ride the fence line. So I was like, there's something down here last night. I showed him. He just kind of, okay. So I just kind of keep my eyes out. And this was the oldest one that lived across the highway from us. Well, a little later on, I was getting ready to go on back to work, getting stuff in the Jeep, and the middle uncle, and the reason why I refer to him like that, just a little side note, it's the oldest uncle, middle uncle, then my mother. My mother's the baby of the three. Anyways, he'd come down there, and we normally don't talk unless we gotta talk. And he pulled up. He goes, heard you kind of had a weird thing happen last night. And I described, pretty much what I described here about, the walking up and then the squatting down and the talking. And now this uncle, he's hunted his whole life. And now he's in his mid to late 60s. He's hunted all his life. He's coon hunted. He's deer hunted. He has heard some stuff. Is you sure it wasn't a deer? I was like, no, wasn't a deer. Was not a deer. He's got kids, and I told him, I was like, how it is when your daughter was learning to, she's got a voice, and she'd sit there and talk to you, but you couldn't understand what yeah. And he looked at me, he looked around, made sure no one else was standing there. He goes, all seriousness, I think it was Bigfoot? Could have been. That was the first person I've ever heard around there actually seriously asked that question. Could have been. Could have been. And we just both kind of shrugged our shoulders and went on because, like I said, the eye shine, didn't really see a body, didn't see a silhouette, but I could tell it was standing up with the forward-facing eyes like ours because the eye shine. Well, I went on because he knew I was getting ready to go on because they knew my routine, which is no big deal because they knew to be a little bit more cautious, watch my stuff, watch the house, because mom and dad didn't move down there till about 2020. Anyways, I went on, not much happened. About 2019, I was home. I'd been bush hogging, and I kept my bush hogging, my tractor, like I said, on the east side of the house with a couple other pieces of equipment I had under a little carport. And by this time, Dad had put up motion activated lights on those two corners of the house, on that back bedroom where I stayed, then on that front porch facing the driveway. And it wasn't uncommon from time to time for it to come on because it may have caught a deer, a rabbit. Occasionally, one of the neighbor's dogs that lived behind us would get out of the pen or its pen and come wandering up to the house, just being nosy, So, first, that's what I thought it was okay, it's neighbor's dog. I'm going to have to run it off because I was in front of the house going west to east. Because I had noticed, I could tell that light was on because it faced, going south and east because they had the two heads on it, two bulbs. So Dad had them fixed, one going behind the house, one going down that side. Oh, okay, cool beans. By the time I get around there, just kind of yell at the dog or something, don't want to hurt the dog because I know who it belongs to. And I get to the corner of the house, and I'm about 10, 15 feet maybe in front of the house. And the house is probably about 30 feet deep, going from the front porch corner to the back corner on the bedroom. Like I said, keep in mind the house is about a foot and a half to 2 feet off the ground, and it's good ways up to about middle of the window back there on the back. I knew about where the window was, and I noticed this big old head sticking out from inside the house, looking at me. It pull its head back, pull it back out there, like playing a game of peekaboo. And by this time, I have stopped. I can see clearly down the side of the house. I'm looking at this thing, looking at me. And I can tell it's hairy. It's brown, all over its head. And the way the light was, because it was just below the light, and the light was up there a little ways, about the 6.5, 7 foot mark, and it was about the 6 foot mark, because I could tell it was kind of leaning a little bit, because I couldn't catch the body. I'm sitting there thinking, who's back here? Again, trying to think logically. Think that somebody's just back here messing around. I don't want to jump to conclusions. That's a couple seconds go by, a few seconds go by, and it finally just steps out from behind the house. And when it stands up, its head's at that light or just a little above the light. And it dawns on me. I'm sitting there going, this is Bigfoot. But what dawned on me was this is the exact thing staring in that window, because it was at the exact same window I've caught it at multiple times, looking in. And I'm sitting there, it's like, this is exactly what this thing is. And I get a better look of the face. It's more of the human face, but, almost like the caveman face, where it's got the pronounced brown eyebrows over the eyes, the big nose, but, just the human features, the more human-like features, but just big. And you think Shaquille O'Neal or the Big Show, you think them are some big old boys. This thing was every bit as tall as they are, if not a tad taller, and every bit more wider than they are. Now, I'm going to go back because best thing, Arnold Schwarzenegger in his prime, how he was ripped, where you could tell all the muscles, the ab muscle, all the muscles just below the pecs and the chest. It wasn't like that. Now, it was big. It was built. It was powerfully built, but it was barrel chested. And it had the classic, hands below the knees when it finally stretched them out. Because what it did, it stepped out from behind the house and it was turning. So I got the chest, then the side profile, then mostly a back profile was the longest I've seen of it because it walked into those woods where I guess it could have been the same one that was squatting by the fence line. Could have been. I didn't care to go introduce myself. Really did. And across the back, it was that 4 to 5 feet across the back right there in the shoulders. And it had that classic gorilla-like almost head where the watermelon pumpkin weird mashup where it's the big bulky head with that cone on the top, almost the watermelon end cone, about the best way I can describe it. And you could tell just in the back itself, it had a powerful built back. And that's when I caught a good portion of the back fur that is also just brown, just a brown, not like a dark brown, but a good brown color. And from the house to the wood lines was probably 25 yards. It was not running, but its stride took it probably just a couple of seconds, few seconds, 5 seconds. And I mean, it crossed that 25 yards quick. And then once it got into the woods, it was gone. And I mean, I'm still sitting here in front of the house. I mean, this was probably a minute, 2 minutes tops that, all this took place. So, at the time I had enough sense to knock the tractor back in neutral because I didn't want to pop the clutch and it go on do its thing. Because I'm sitting there wanting to stare at this thing. I'm trying to figure out, I'm more in awe at it and more curiosity, trying to figure out, this is unique. This is actually the third time that I've seen this thing, that I've actually got to see this thing fully. And so, I sat there probably another minute or two because I was like, you know what, I'm going to give it a minute, let it go on, not try to cause a problem. I don't want it to feel threatened and let it go on. So like I said, gave it a minute or two and parked my tractor, went in the house, got me something to eat. I'm thinking on it, I'm kind of excited. I've seen this thing a third time and I know how most people are. Oh, there is no way you can have this multiple sightings. Well, I didn't ask for them. I wasn't out there hunting for them. I'm taking care of chores and it happened. There wasn't no me calling this thing. There wasn't no putting out food. I didn't send it an email. Hey man, I'm going to pass in front of the house. Why don't you come up behind the house? None of that. It's just, it happened to be there. I happened to be there, just like the other 2 times. I happened to be hunting. It happened to be there. I happened to go check on the tractor shed when I had trespassers. There we are. We just happened to be there. So I went inside. I ate, got a shower, and I was sitting in the little breakfast nook overlooking the carport and overlooking the barn. And on that end, again, there's that nightlight. It was working, and I was sitting there messing around with my phone. And off to my left, I could see out those 2 big windows. Well, there's actually 4 in the breakfast nook. There's 2 that overlook the highway, and then the 2 that overlook going down to the barn. And you can see the hill, that hill in that big pasture where the cows and the main pond is, just right there behind the barn. And then once you get to the top of it, there's another cross fence, and then it drops off. And then the one uncle that walked up the fence line talking gibberish, like I said, he lives just on the other side of that hill. And I noticed another light just appear in the sky right there. It was a bright white light. It wasn't really shining down. It just had the underside of whatever this thing was lit up. First, I thought it was the night light. Thought I was just seeing the night light, closed my eyes, looked up. Well, there's the night light. Then there's this thing way further back. back here kind of behind his house in that pasture. And I was like, okay, logically, let's think about this. Is that possibly his old lady with a drone? Could be. I sat there and I sitting there looking at it because I was at the table and I had a clear line of sight to it. Nothing in my way other than the light line, which wasn't that big, wouldn't block it out. Because I was looking for a flashing light, something. Like I said, all it had was the belly of it lit up. I was like, no, it's not a drone. It's way too big. I could tell it was too big from where I was sitting. And this was 400 yards, give or take. Maybe 253, somewhere in that ballpark. I was like, well, I don't hear anything like a helicopter. Well, maybe because it's far off and I'm sitting inside. So I stepped out the door onto the carport. Nothing. I'm still looking at this thing back here. Well, it slowly makes its way up to the light line, and I get a good look at it, and all I see is just this bright light, no blades spinning, no nothing, and it goes casually just past the house, goes about the same way that the Bigfoot went. I'm sitting there looking at it going, that's a little weird. So I guess I get a twofer for the night or something. Now, I'm going to put this out there. I'm not making any correlation between the Bigfoot and the UFO. Is there any correlation? I don't know. It could have just been coincidence. It could have been a helicopter. I don't know, but I didn't see anything to tell me otherwise. Didn't hear anything as far as it could have been a normal aircraft. I'm used to helicopters in the area. People looking at surveying their land from above. I know what they look like. I know what the small airplanes look like because there's a few people that use the small airplanes to seed fields, to fertilize fields. I know what they look like. This was nothing of that. So I went on back inside. I was like, okay, I'm going to bed. This is, officially got weird. I mean, it was weird before, but it just got weird. So I went on inside, put it to the back of my mind, went on to bed. Again, that uncle, next morning, before he went to work, caught me. Man, you wasn't flying anything out back of the house last night, was you? Dude, I ain't got nothing that flies. I don't have a drone. The only person in the family that has a drone lives in Georgia. I told him, I was like, yeah, I seen it too. I know what you're talking about. He goes, thank God. I thought I was going nuts last night. I was like, no, you wasn't nuts. You wasn't nuts. So we left it at that, just kind of, again, shrugged our shoulders, went on. And then, some time went on. Rest of 19 completed. 2020 almost completed before we decided to get the last little bit weird for the year. I was bush hogging that little field where the tractor shed is, where I had the one sighting where it was squatting down. At the time, I was running a dedicated run where I was home every weekend, out every week. So it gave me time to catch up on a little bit of maintenance that the two uncles couldn't do with their big tractors. So I was bush hogging close to that fence line where I saw the one squatting down, but I was further down the fence line, and something told me to look over across. Now, it was to my right at the time. I was pointing towards the house, and that fence line and those woods was to my right. And keep in mind, in that little area, it was so thick with briars. Even with a good pair of blue jeans or something, they would still get through the blue jeans and tear you up. So it didn't make any sense when I seen this. Standing next to a tree, it was an overcast day, so there wasn't much good clear light, just enough to see that something with head, shoulders, and down to just past its waist, about 5-6 foot tall, was standing there, and I could tell it had shaggy hair, kind of dark colored shaggy hair. I just couldn't tell you, was it a brown dark color? Was it a black dark color? Was it a combination? I couldn't tell you that. It was just standing there, stock still, staring at me. I was like, okay. I know no one's going to be down there. So I went on about my business because I was getting ready to put up for the night and go pull back out Monday morning because this was Sunday. So I had a chance to think about it all week and went back in, and I was like, you know what? I still got the bush hog hooked up to the tractor because I'm not going to go down there and get tore up with these briars. I'm not doing it. And I've managed to back down the fence line, back in, because there's a few trees down through there. I had to be careful because before I did all this, I'd went on the other side of the fence line where I was and found the tree that it was standing next to, which was probably 30 feet, 40 feet from the fence line. And I was like, okay, there's the tree. I don't see it standing there. I don't see anything there. I don't see a stump. I don't see any weeds growing together, clumped together. There is nothing there besides this tree, this pine tree. And the pine tree itself was probably 3 feet around if you had to go measure the base of it. It didn't have the shape of what I saw. It didn't have the shape of a head, shoulders, none of that. So I went on the other side of the fence line, worked my way through, back down, letting the bush hog take the brunt of the briars, and bush hog that whole little area around this tree, probably a good quarter of an acre up to the fence line, then away from the tree, the best I could in between all the stuff that's down there. And I get off the tractor and I go back over to the fence line. I'm sitting there looking at it. Like, okay, yes, that's the tree. And I'm looking around, checking behind me, checking in the field, checking past that tree because I'd left my tractor just past that tree to kind of give a size comparison, you know. Like, no, there's something seriously standing here watching me, shaggy fur, humanoid form, watching me work. Okay. Good to know y'all still hanging around. I don't care if y'all hang around. It's just, okay. And, you know, I've brought this up to Mother. And this is where the little side notes here at the end come up, because that neighbor's house used to belong to the property. There used to not be a house there. That little 15 acres used to belong to that property. My grandfather gave it to my mother when her and dad married. They built a house. And they had bull mastiffs. Now, if you know anything about bull mastiffs, they're not huge dogs, but they're not little. They're in the 120, 130-ish range as far as pounds go. And this was sometime in the 80s. I may have been born at the time, may have been, but I would have been really, really young. I don't remember. But Mom was telling me they had a male and a female. They had stepped off out of her vision into the woods. They were barking at something. And if you know anything about dogs, doesn't matter the size, they had the alert bark, get away from here, intruder bark, whatever you want to call it. Then they have the distress bark. It's two different barks, two different pitches. And Mom said it went from that intruder, alert, security bark, type bark. And you could hear the male over the female. He had a deeper bark from what she said. And then all of a sudden, the male went silent and the female went from the security bark to I'm in stress bark. She said it took her forever to call her back to the house. She finally come back to the house. The male never did show up. So she called her one of her brothers, one of my uncles, to the house. They were home. Dad was working. And he went back there, you know, he goes, Well, I see where they walked or went back there after something. And then it was like something picked up the male and walked off with it. Almost 130-pound dog picks it up, and something this big is not just going to get picked up and just let you walk off with it, especially if it's after you. And Mom said she didn't hear anything other than the dog stopped barking. That's all she heard was that dog stopped barking and the female going to her stress bark. And, well, she told Dad when he got home. He looked the next day, And the same thing with the calf story that my neighbor had gone missing. No one reported seeing a dog. Couldn't find the dog, didn't find the dog remains, so Lord knows what happened. Then there's a couple of times where Mom was at the farmhouse, and she recalls vividly one night sitting there in that middle bedroom on the hallway. Something walked up, ran its fingers across the screen of the window. She had the window open. She sat up in bed. She goes, well, I hear, my brother's in the back bedroom back there. What, Neil? And again, no one messed around the house because my grandfather wouldn't allow. He let you do your thing, but he also made it understood, don't do stupid stuff. Don't provoke a negative reaction. And she went in there and told him, he goes, no, let it be. Could have been one of your brothers. No, they're back here in the bedroom, Daddy. Well, then there's nights where she had her window up and she'd hear these weird calls. Wasn't a cow, wasn't a dog, wasn't the coyotes, wasn't any other of the typical animals, just these weird, what she described like a throaty type call, or the only way she knew to put it, and the only way I know to put it, because I didn't hear it, I wasn't around. And then, stuff like that would go on. And then there was one night, way before I had my first sighting, something had happened to my grandmother where one would stay at the house if I wasn't at the house, if I was working late. And it was normally the younger uncle, the middle baby of the family. He'd stay down there because he didn't mind. And the truck I drove, or the pickup I drove, I still got it. You can hear me about 2 miles away. I've got an exhaust on it where it's got that nice deep bass where you can hear me. It's not annoying. I know most people think, oh God, it's annoying. No, it's not that. But he's sitting out there, he's smoking a cigarette, and he heard something across on the other side where the oldest uncle lives, but back in the swamp. And when I got home, he goes, you didn't see anything across the highway or down there by Terrible, did you? No. Why? Well, just before I heard you come around the corner down there, I heard something call out down there. It wasn't one of the neighbors. It is animal, kind of, but it wasn't a cow. It was loud. Almost like a human done it, but it wasn't a human. Well, when he had to leave, he circled back around through there and came back to the house, and we're both just sitting there looking at each other like, don't know. And I'm sitting there going, I don't know what to tell you, because this was before me having my first sight. But, it's just a ton of weird stuff like that. And then there was one night, this was 2018. If you've ever heard an owl hoot, and if you heard them enough, you never forget how they sound. They're a different pitch altogether. And then if somebody makes an owl sound and you really pay attention, there's a whole, like I said, that different pitch level to it. I'm sitting out on the carport, and it's quiet, no traffic. This highway, rush hour, contains of maybe 10 vehicles in the span of 30 minutes, maybe. That's rush hour. And at night, it's pretty well quiet. Once it gets dark, most everybody's done doing what they're doing. Well, I'm sitting out there, and I hear one owl go off. I thought, okay, cool. We got an owl around here, and I didn't think much of it. I don't know, about 30 minutes later, I hear it again, and I really was paying attention. That doesn't sound right. I hear another one. Like, no, that's something making an owl sound. And I hear another one call, and it sounded like it was two of them. One would do the call, a few seconds, the other one would respond. A few seconds, that one would respond. A couple seconds later, the other one would respond. I'm just sitting out here in the swing on the carport going, seriously? This is intriguing, but I'm going inside because I don't know what they up to. Because, like I said, I got the night light, so I got the surrounding area by me, but they're off in the woods, so, I can't see in the woods what they're about to do, so I don't want to miss a rock coming at my head either. But that's pretty much it for my sightings and experiences with them. So I don't know what to tell you. And like I said, with the UFO, I don't know what the correlation is. Could have been just coincidence. Don't know. And all I can tell you, if you've had your own sightings, they're there. They're out there. So they're here. We're here. That's all I'm going to tell you.
Well, that's it for tonight's show. If you've had a Bigfoot sighting and would like to be a guest, please go to mybigfootsighting.com and let us know. Thanks for listening. Have a great night.
Seen a bunch of rundown no-horse towns where the church is the backbone, loves in the plow, and the five-string melodies grooving, with the farmland rows where the roots run deep, beyond the noise of the busy streets, where the songs of the South are soothing. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah.